little bit different from a PowerPoint that works through slides. It's a framework and it moves us through a journey, okay? So in case you haven't seen one of these before.
It's kind of interactive presentations, isn't it?
Yeah, more fun. So you may recognize the image here. This was something that was developed by one of our youth in the youth strategy, and this is our branding that we used throughout. And she was so clever that she actually developed a video that we took with us when we went to youth engagement sessions. Chantel Chan and Dr. Neil Smith developed a great video for us. The last youth development strategy was done in 2003. So one of the things that we wanted to find out is what has changed in the last 12 years for young people in Saanich. We started off with a goal to have a very public participation process, and looking at the new policy with Saanich, we really kind of worked within the involve and collaborate stages of the framework for the public participation policy. When we started, we wanted to be very much an approach where we went to youth and we went to the community rather than asking them to come to us. So we designed the project so that we went to high schools and we involved youth and public on our teams for doing the research project. So we had a few teams. We had one staff team, which we called our core team. We had 5 staff on it from the Parks and Recreation Department. And then we opened it up to our community. We had 3 community members, one from a sports organization in Saanich, one from a Residents Association Saanich, and one retired from Island Health Authority as a public health nurse. We had 5 young people sit on our project team, and we also were really fortunate. We had 2 representatives from School District 61 and 63. We had the Associate Superintendent and the Assistant Superintendent. So that opened up a lot of doors for us and made sure that we were able to go to where the youth were. Another goal that we had was we really wanted to have dialogue with youth and with community members, and so we structured a lot of our engagements. So it was sitting around a table and having discussions and asking questions and having interactions between young people and older people in the community. So our project teams on the left, we also created a really dynamic group and opportunity for young people, which was our youth research team. And we had 10 young people that came in, and they were trained on facilitation skills. They were trained on our methodology of interviews and focus groups and inquiry cafes. And the majority of those youth were very involved throughout all of our engagement. We had 1 or 2 youth that attended most of our engagements. They were so interested in the project. And this gave them an opportunity to develop leadership skills, communication skills, life skills, and also be able to add something onto their resume, which is what so many youth are looking for. It's a foot in the door. So these are our 2 dynamic teams. And I just wanted to thank, there's a few people in our audience today that are from our project team, and we couldn't have done it without them. It's a very rewarding process. The type of research that we used was based on an appreciative inquiry model. And so what this does is it looks at the assets and the strengths of the municipality, of the programs and services and events that we currently run, and we analyzed it from the perspective of what is working well in our parks and in our recreation services, and how can we duplicate that, or how can we build on those assets and make other things successful, rather than a deficit-focused approach, which really looks at the weaknesses and it looks at gaps in services. So the appreciative inquiry is great because it allows you to look at visioning and looking ahead of what we want to see happen within the community. So between March and June, we completed over 44 engagements, and I know there's quite a few familiar faces around the table, and thank you to those that attended our engagements. We did things like sounding boards at different events, like the cycling festival. We went to high schools, we went to middle schools, we went to conferences, we had a summit, and we did interviews. So we had a huge number of people involved, and we also strive to keep them involved throughout the project. So we feel that we reached our goal of a high level of public engagement as well as meaningful public engagement. We really wanted to not be a token approach with youth, but to have them involved in a high level of discussion and dialogue. And we also want to be accountable to them so that when we go back and we report year to year, that we have something to go back to those young people and report to them on. So we promoted our engagement through Facebook, through Saanich website, Parks and Recreation, e-newsletters, a huge email distribution list that included churches, SCAN, sports organizations, and other youth organizations. We contacted the schools, district PACs, as well as youth service provider networks. So we just laid out a quick summary of our public engagement timeline. So about a year ago we started and we recruited our project team and our youth research team. Between March and June we did all our public engagements, and 4 of those were more like a focus group where we invite people to come to us, and the rest of them were, about 40 of them, where we went to youth and community. In June we brought together a summit, and that was an intergenerational dialogue with youth and with service providers and with seniors and adults, and we had dialogue around 10 emerging themes that had come out of the data. We corroborated that information with a survey that we put online from June to August. And then we started writing the final report and implementation plan. So in mid-October, we sent that out for feedback, out to the public, out to every single person that we had an email for that had participated in our project, to all of our community associations, sports organizations. We selected youth serving professionals in other municipalities as well to give us their professional opinion too. We got great feedback, and we incorporated that into draft 2, which we presented at the end of November to the Healthy Saanich and Parks, Trails and Recreation Committees. And we're happy to report that they endorsed the report and implementation plan, and that's why we're here, is to look for your endorsement tonight. So what did we learn? Here's a few highlights. These were 6 key themes that we kept hearing at all of our engagements. The first one is we need to shift away from bubble wrapping our children. A lot of kids are feeling very hyper-parented. There's not a lot of risk for them to engage in. Everything that they do is protected. Everything is safe. They want to experience some risk. They want to be able to make decisions and develop judgment and confidence. There is an increased amount of stress and anxiety that young people are feeling today. This was reiterated time and time and time again. No matter if it was a small group or a large group, youth are under a lot of stress. What can recreation and parks do to help be one of the solutions for young people to learn how to deal with their stress and anxiety? We also need to go where youth are. We have some amazing rec centers and teen centers and parks, but where are our youth? They are often in their schools and their own settings. So how can we look at a delivery model or work with youth differently so that we are actually engaging with them where there's no barriers? They don't have transportation and cost issues when they're in school. We also want to move towards a co-creation model with youth, so we're working directly with them and we're supporting them in what their goals and dreams and visions are in organizing recreation events and festivals and programs. We also heard a strong need that we still need youth designated spaces, and not just in our teen centers, but in other areas in the community. And lastly, and probably one of the most positive things, is youth wish to contribute to their communities in meaningful ways. So they're very interested in volunteering, they're very interested in leadership opportunities, and as you know, Saanich Recreation and Parks, we offer a lot of different leadership opportunities for young people. So it was a real encouragement for us as we continue to develop and advance those programs and services. And at this point, I'm going to pass it over to Jason Jones, and he is our recreation programmer who oversees our youth services. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So now that we have gone out and talked to them all and found out what they had to say, we gathered that information. What were we going to do with it? And we came to that stage where we really had to look at how we were currently operating. We needed to sit down, like most organizations and sections, to set a direction, find a vision, a mission, and our guiding principles of how we were going to move forward with what we had. And the second thing we were going to do was really develop those themes. In the summit we had 10 themes, and through that whole process we kind of moved them all down and wiggled into 6 strategic priorities that we could move forward with. So, and that's what we're going to go through next. We're going to present, this is our new and improved vision for youth services through Parks and Recreation. Inspired youth creating their future. We really wanted to move away from the, sorry, there's some feedback there. We wanted to kind of move away from the providing of services, but it's really working with youth and the inspiration of youth and helping them create their own future. It's not us providing it, but them building it themselves and us supporting that. So as we get into the 6 strategic priorities, we have, they were quite typical to what we had in the past versions of our youth development strategy. Increasing participation. We'd heard that youth who have been active, they might have started in a sport or something like that, 6, 7, 8, 9, they're dancers, they're playing hockey, they're playing soccer. they get to that age around 10, 11, 12 where it's getting quite competitive, there's a lot of pressures on them, they get more schoolwork, and you're starting to see them leave those activities for some reason. So we really wanted to find some way to how we boost those numbers back up. Some through that was co-creation, having them work with us to co-create some of those. And I think the biggest point was increased entry points. We really see that if you are a 14-year-old youth looking to start a new activity, there isn't a lot of options for you. If you didn't start at 7 or 8, then there's no stream for you to kind of hop in, and we're told that there's a lot of stress on youth who are trying to come in thinking that they don't have the skills to do those at that comfort level at a 14-year-old to join those. So that was a big one for increased participation. And another one that went in there was our safe spaces and safer spaces for our disadvantaged youth groups. So our gender identified, our immigrant or Aboriginal populations really have to work and build some relationship with those groups to provide those safer spaces. So, and those well-being and that increased participation. Our second strategic priority was collaboration. And as we'd already started in this process, we really built some great foundational relationships with schools. We kind of, we haven't had that kind of in most of the schools that we've worked with. So now we've actually built those, and we've been in, we know the principals, we know the vice principals, and teachers who are allies and strength in our schools. So it's a big, big boost for us to actually build those. And also the youth serving provider network. There's a lot of other youth service providers in the Greater Victoria area that are outside of the Saanich, but now we have great relationships with those to be able to bring those back in. So those were big ones for us out of that collaboration. Our third strategic objective is risk and outdoor play. Usually you're thinking about risk, you're thinking about outdoor activity, but we really wanted to make sure in this section that we captured the risk of doing artistic things, or as we've seen today, there's public speaking. How many youth get an opportunity to do public speaking? It's a risk, right, to come out and stand. People who come out and stand in front of you when you come to your meetings, it's a risk for them. There's success and there's failure. Youth really wanted those. If they were telling poetry, or if they were drawing or painting and putting their stuff on display, there's a risk there that there's acceptance and having that success. So really that was a big notion for us. It's not just the outdoor play side of risk and bicycling and skateboarding, those type of risks, but putting yourself out there in other ways as well. So the fourth strategic objective is social well-being. And as Sandra mentioned earlier, we really heard that anxiety and stress is very, very strong in our youth. And that is something that has come over the last many years. They're really seeing a lot of issues, and it's not just us. You're seeing it in the news, you're seeing it everywhere. But the levels that they have are mind-blowing. So really figuring out how we work with other service providers who excel in this already in the mental health programs. And recreation is a strong one. We know that if you recreate, you're less likely to have those anxiety and stresses. So how do we activate those and educate them and make sure that those are part of their everyday existence in schools and when they're outside of schools. So really that's what we really wanted to focus on with the social well-being. Our fifth strategic objective was youth spaces. And again, as Sandra mentioned, it wasn't just talking about our teen centers. We have 3 fantastic youth centers that are there and cater to a specific group of youth who come to them regularly. But really we're talking about making our rec centers friendlier. And comments that came from the youth quite often was that our rec centers are for young kids and really old people. They don't really see themselves in there. There's no place that they sit and lounge in a teen center. There's no music in a recreation center. Like, where do you go to see that? They like libraries because it's quiet, but they have comfortable chairs and things like that. So, there are ways that we can make those youth spaces in parks, in recreation centers, where they feel like they can have a home. So that was the portion for that. And in order for us to really focus on these youth spaces, we really have to reorganize the way our youth programmers operate. Traditionally, they've been focused on running their teen center and doing some stuff outside, but really we need them under this project to go out and be building the relationships with the schools, talking to the youth where they're at, finding out what it is that they're needing. So that's a big portion for us, is refocusing some of those programmers' responsibilities out of that. And our last strategic objective is communication. We had a good chuckle. It was kind of one of the few ones on the 10, down on our 10 themes, but we really found out as we went and talked to the youth and said, they really don't know much about what we do. They don't read our active living guide, they don't read our websites, they don't communicate in the methods that us as adults communicate in. And we really found out that we really have to incorporate them and involve youth in that. So one of our strategic plans was to create a youth kind of co-advisory group to direct us on how we communicate with the youth to the best of our abilities. So using that and involving the youth and finding those connections through the schools and through the other community organizations, so how we can best communicate our services and programs, and not just ours, but what's out there for the youth. And that's what they're really looking for, is they don't know about things, they don't know how to volunteer, they don't know how to do these things, because there's not one place to communicate this. So trying to pull that information together would be fantastic. So those are our six strategic objectives that come out of the plan. So part of the strategic document as well as an implementation plan. It is designed to go from 2016 to 2020, which seems like a long time. 5 years, our last one was a 10-year program, so we're having it nice and short. This is great. And through this, we already have a budget process in place, so any requesting that we would have for budget resources and whatnot would be included in our annual budgeting processes, and would be requested to do that. And wanted to thank you very much for the end of the presentation, but I would also like to thank you on behalf of the Youth Services, to thank you for your leadership in moving forward with these type of strategic planning that we do. There aren't a lot of other municipalities who do this type of work, so there's a lot of eagerness out there from the other municipalities to see this document too, and see how portions of this can be implemented as well, and applaud you for your leadership in that. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Any questions?
Yes, there's no more in your presentation. I just opened up some quick questions before we go to public input. All right, thank you so much.
Thank you.
So at this time, I'd like to call on members of the public to come up to the microphone. Are there any members of the public who wish to speak? Calling for a second time, any members of the public who wish to speak? Calling for a third? No. Great. Come on up.
I've never ever been to a council meeting, but I was
Welcome.
on that. Thank you for letting me be here. That's
Sure.
great.
Can you start off by just giving us your name and address?
I'm Maureen Rowan, and I live on 4051 Shelburne. And I was on the community advisory, and this team was absolutely amazing. So the engagement that they did with youth, I just really speak very highly of their work, and just really appreciate being a citizen and having that kind of staff to support youth.
Okay, thank you for that. Are there any other members of the public who wish to speak? Calling for a third time? All right, I'll close public input, and then I'll move it over to council for decision. Councilor Dermott.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to move the recommendation. If there's a second, I'll speak to it.
Seconded by Councilor Plant, who had his hand waving first.
Thank you. I would really like to thank staff for what I think is an absolutely excellent and absolutely, as being suggested, leading program in terms of developing strategy to youth. I read the document and read what had been done, and I was really very impressed. And some of the principles in there have been really long-standing and have never entirely been addressed. For example, the idea of multiple entry points. In a prior life, I was a high school teacher and coaching sports teams at a very highly competitive level. And you're absolutely right. There develops a pyramid. At the base of the pyramid, a lot of people get in, and then the pyramid is refined and comes almost to a point where a very small number of individuals are participating at a very high level. And that's important, because some of those individuals will go on to make that a career or a focus in university or whatever it might be. And you want always people to have the ability to develop their skills, whether it's performing arts or academic or whatever it might be, or athletic. But I remember that, and I remember as a school teacher making a point, even at the high school level, of running an A team and a B team and a C team. And the A team was, of course, the high competitive, some who went on to go to university. But out of the B and C team, even at high school level, some of them wound up moving to the A level, even though they entered late. And others simply found it as a highlight of their high school career and later recreational career, that they had that opportunity for participation and to enter at a different level. So I just found truth virtually in everything you had to say. I think it's a wonderfully designed report, and I really wish you all the best in implementing it, and I'm sure that you will receive support of council in making sure that that opportunity occurs. Thank you again.
Thank you. Councillor Brownell, and then Councillor Murdoch.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I too want to thank staff and the youth and the community. This is an excellent document. I mean, some of the things within the document resonate to me because a number of years ago, I remember we had a youth municipal council before the one that we have now. And some of the youth would say to me, you know, Saanich needs this, or Saanich is missing this in programming and things like that. And so as I go through some of the strategy, and it says, propose new and inventive ideas into playground design, youth-specific spaces and park features. I mean, that's exactly what's needed. I mean, historically we design spaces the usual way, right? And so getting that input from youth was important. I love this one about explore additional municipal departments to host and support new internship placements. I also think for Saanich that's a great idea to come forward. And the one I heard from youth back then was, Saanich has a bunch of programs that, you know, should be discontinued. They're not really something we want to be engaged with, and so I saw that in there. And then create a report format so that there'll be an annual report and outcomes of the strategy, which I think is really important. Because through some of the debates we had, that's what the youth wanted. They created debates, but they really wanted us to know that they were working on the strategy and they were part of it. And so reporting out annually, I think, is a real key one. So again, I want to thank you for all the work. It's an excellent document, and I will look forward to updates as they come forward. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Councillor Murdoch.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. I won't repeat what has been said. I really want to acknowledge the great work of staff, but in particular, I'm so impressed by the public engagement that took place here. I mean, the summary was impressive on its own, but just 44 engagements, 1,100 persons engaged as part of that process, and that wherever it was possible to retain the contact information for that person, they were re-invited to review the draft, but be re-engaged as part of the ongoing implementation. And I think that really speaks to the foundational role that the folks who were, the youth who were engaged in this, played in putting this strategy together. I'm also really impressed at the way that the report flows through. Here are the findings. Here, like, we didn't just set out with a bunch of assumptions. We went out and asked people, and that was how we based. I'm saying we, like I had anything to do with it. I mean, the authors of the report, the youth who contributed to this, really formed what was known, the basis for the actions going forward. And I think that's really terrific. There were not a lot of assumptions made. It was not, hey, we're doing a great job, but it was also based on what's going well. What the appreciative inquiry, I think, is a terrific method in order to start the ball rolling and really start developing a vision for the future. So really pleased with how it's laid out. I think it's a very clear narrative. It's a very clear path forward, and I think it circles back to the folks who really helped you put this together, the foundation of the document and the number of youth who were involved, who will then presumably be part of that iterative process throughout implementation and review. So just thoroughly impressed with that, and I think the product really shows the results of what was a terrific process. So thank you very much, and I don't just wish you success, I look forward to seeing the implementation as part of this, and really offering it as a thank you to the people who gave their time in order to have this come forward.
Thank you. Councillor Bryce, did you have your hand up?
Definitely support everything that Councillor Murdoch has said. Being a member of Parks, Trails and Recreation, I had a chance to have touch points with this process along the way, and right from the beginning you could sense that the leadership in our senior staff knew that this was going to be something very special, and to then engage in one of the sessions and with some of the youth that they had involved, it was really very inspirational. And, you know, talk to some of these young people who were just so frank and so good about putting out their best ideas, and to see this all come now to conclusion, actually not to conclusion, to the beginning of what will now become the programs, is really very exciting. I think a lot of projects that Saanich Parks and Recreation have taken on have been excellent, but somehow this particular project, right from the get-go, seemed to have whatever that sort of royal jelly is, that magic to kind of propel it along, and with very, very gifted people. So I think I too just want to add my congratulations, and I look forward to the next steps, which are the programming changes and the engagement and the involvement of youth, because obviously that's what we're doing it for, that investment.
Great. Thank you. Councillor Haynes, and then Ward Monday.
So, how not to repeat all these things and still recognise the excellence of this piece of work? On 3 levels. First of all, your actual written and graphic presentation in the document and how you describe the process is outstanding. The actual process you executed was outstanding. But what most has moved me in recognising the excellence of your work is how youth-centric it truly has been and will be. And I don't know if there are mechanisms where we can put this type of process forward for awards of some kind. If there are, we should, and I am sure our neighbouring municipalities will look at this as a guiding light of what is possible with a youth-centric approach. One of your statistics is that the number of youth in our municipality is decreasing, I think 6.7% or something like that, which just increases their incredible value for what they bring to our community. Thank you so very much.
Thank you, Councillor Wardman.
Thank you, Mayor. I too would like to say thank you for a report well done. I remember a number of times when I happened to drop in at McDonald's, I see kids not going up in the slide, but they try and get outside the fence and climb up the fence. And there's one line in here: many youth perceive that activities available to them have become too safe. One student explained he felt that he was being bubble wrapped. And as I've watched our playgrounds that we spent thousands of dollars on, they're not the playgrounds that we had when we were kids. When we were kids, if we fell, we fell. But we soon learned that it was better not to fall, so to speak. And yet that isn't there for our kids today. We just fence them in and almost protect them too much. So it was interesting to see that come out. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Sanders?
Oh, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I want to say also a wonderful report, and I think very, very well done. It was interesting, Councillor Wardle said that, and I was down at Willows Beach recently, and I grew up in my early years in that neighborhood. And they had a slide that I think was as high as the ceiling, and that was the challenge. Councillor Price must remember too, to get to the point where you could go down like the fireman pole. Well, nowadays, kids got up higher than that little lectern there. That's as far as we'll let them climb. So I think it's great to recognize those things too.
Great, thank you. Could I call our staff back up to the microphone? I have a question that is generated from this discussion. The youth development strategy that's online has a section 311 that talks about future considerations. And it says, I'm just going to repeat it for everybody here who hasn't read it. During the scope of our YDS process, we became aware of other complementary actions which were outside of the scope of the project. The following represent a list of future considerations for parks and recreation development. Now, the first of these bullet items is exploring the viability of resourcing a community engagement coordinator for Parks and Rec, whose role would be to ensure positive, successful citizen and youth participation in the development and implementation of parks and recreation projects. Given what we've seen and the request that's going to essentially come forth into our budget process, would you like to see, even though this is in future considerations and not quite at scope, would you like to see this included in the budget and have this position funded as, or considered, basically, would you like to increase the ask?
Yes. The reason it was actually listed in a future consideration is because this was a youth strategy, and we figured that that position would actually look at the larger Saanich Parks and Recreation, so we thought it might move into the next master plan, but we would love to see it. The faster we can get it would be fantastic.
So it's kind of the key thing for me that I think I picked out of this report. It was an exciting presentation, and I think it's going to lead to very exciting programs. But I'm just thinking to myself, in the time that you had and the scope that you're setting for yourselves and the aspirations that you have, that given where we are, it might be, I think, appropriate to just sort of amend the recommendation to include this, and then we'll debate it at budget time. Thank you, that's the question I have. Councilor Plant.
Thank you. This has been the favorite report I've had to read, so that'll be my comments about enjoyability. I want to draw 2 points to Council's attention that I think we should just be prepared for, and one is regarding the fee policy. I personally believe we should do everything we can to get children into our recreation centers and find a way to reduce costs, period. So when that comes back, I think we need to put our money where our flattery is tonight. The second, I think, is very exciting, is offering for youth what we already offer for adults, which is a region-wide pass. I didn't know we didn't offer that. We offer that for adults. We have many children who live in Saanich and recreate elsewhere because maybe they attend a sporting event or something like that. I think we can also look at reciprocating that. So that being said, I would also like to make the amendment that the mayor inferred that council consider